It's day 20 under the Gold Dome. We're halfway home. And as the legislature rockets towards sine die, we're talking space travel. Should Georgia get in on the ground floor of future commercial spaceflight activities? We'll talk with a lawmaker who has stars in his eyes. And have you ever stopped to consider how much Georgia land borders an ocean, a lake, or a river? The legislature is looking at new ways to protect these borders between land and water. Lawmakers starts right now. Welcome to Lawmakers. I'm Bill Nigut. It's day 20 of the 2016 legislative session, and the pace is really picking up at the Gold Dome. Shelby Lin joins us with the very latest in tonight's Capitol Report. Shelby?
That's right, Bill. The 2016 legislative session is half over, if you can believe that, with busier days ahead. Topping our Capitol Report tonight, the Pastor Protection Act. It's the first time one of the big religious liberty bills has come up for debate on the floor of the House or the Senate. This bill would protect ministers from prosecution if they refuse to marry same-sex couples. House Speaker David Ralston backed the measure. There was opposition, just not from anyone in the House chamber.
Well, I rise today to talk about a piece of legislation called the Pastor Protection Act. The best thing I can say about that piece of legislation is the name. If we were to be accurate about what the bill is really intended to do, we would call it the Politician Protection Act.
Even before the bill came up in the House, Senator Josh McCoon rose in the Senate in opposition, calling it a cheap trick to fool voters.
So now we have a bill that is tailor-made for direct mail pieces. It's tailor-made for people going back home to campaign. But it does not one thing to protect religious freedom.
But over in the House, McCoon's comments were ignored. The bill's sponsor, Representative Kevin Tanner, says he heard from dozens of ministers who were worried about going to jail after the Supreme Court ruling on same-sex marriage.
It reassures the faith community, particularly members of the clergy, that the state government has no intention of requiring ministers, priests, or clergy to violate their faith by performing marriage ceremonies that are not in line with their beliefs.
Several others rose to support the bill, including House Speaker David Ralston, who praised the measure as a good place to start.
My purpose is not to prey upon the fears of those we represent or to use their fears for other motives, because I believe this bill shows that starting where there is agreement and mutual trust can be much more productive than attempting to span what seems to be a bottomless chasm.
The House approved the bill on a unanimous vote of 161 to 0. Meanwhile, McCoon's religious liberty bill remains tabled in a House committee. Electric vehicles are once again in the spotlight at the Capitol this year, only not over tax breaks like last year. Atlanta Democrat Representative Scott Holcomb has introduced a bill to reduce registration fees. How much should it cost an electric vehicle owner to register their car? Twice as much as owners of a gas-powered car? Holcomb's bill, HB 878, would bring Georgia's annual electric vehicle registration fee more in line with what gas-powered vehicles are paying. Electric vehicle owners are now facing a $200 registration fee.
It's just inaccurate, and it doesn't reflect what electric vehicle drivers would pay if they were driving gas cars. And so the purpose of the bill is to be fair. And electric vehicles should pay their fair share, but they shouldn't pay 2 times their fair share.
And then there's questions about how many miles an electric vehicle owner can actually drive in a year. The calculation for gas-powered cars and trucks is about 15,000 miles annually, but for electrics, it's far less.
If you have an electric vehicle, for example, a Leaf, it's a range of 90 miles, and then you have to recharge it. So just the laws of physics, you can't drive those many miles because you have to charge it, and charging takes time. And then most of the people that drive them relatively short distances.
Holcomb says electric vehicle owners are overpaying and even subsidizing other drivers.
Most experts who have taken a look at it think that where we are with the $200 fee is about twice really what it should be or more. So the proposal brings it to $75, and there's ranges of people that would probably pay $40, $50 a year to maybe $80, $90 a year if they were driving gas vehicles. So $75 is a nice mean between those.
During last year's legislative session, the General Assembly eliminated the $5,000 a year tax credit for electric vehicle owners. Since then, sales have plummeted. Holcomb says the move hurt the business climate on several levels.
Georgia was foolish in doing away with it, and the reason is we have Porsche's headquarters here, we have Mercedes-Benz coming, we have a Kia plant, we have a comparative advantage in the automotive industry, and we had a very strong comparative advantage in the electric vehicle space, and we've eliminated that.
Finally tonight, ending on a high note, the Georgia Military College Prep School Band helped celebrate Georgia Day at the Capitol. The Peach State was founded almost 300 years ago by James Oglethorpe and was one of the original 13 colonies. That's it from the Capitol, Bill. Back to you.
We've got a lot to get to tonight, so let me start by introducing our guests. Representative Debbie Buckner is here. She's a Democrat from Junction City, and Representative Jason Spencer, a Republican from Woodbine. It's really great to have you both here tonight. And, you know, I want to start, if I may. You know, we're going to talk about your waterways bill. But Jason Spencer, you know, we talk about the same issues over and over and over again, as you do throughout the legislative session. Nobody gets to talk very often about a spaceport coming to Georgia, and that's something you are now promoting at the legislature. Talk about what your goal is, your ambition, your broadest vision.
Well, the goal is to attract the commercial space industry in Georgia. It is a $300 billion per year business, and we are trying to get a sliver of that pie to come to Camden County. So that's what we're doing with the legislation. That's its intent.
Now, we should point out that that's a long way off. Why don't you tell us what your first step in this, the bill that you've introduced this year, would do to begin paving the way for this?
Well, to put some context behind that, right now, the Camden County Commissioners has commissioned an environmental impact study. We are right now in the middle of that process. The public hearings for that was in December. Over 500 people came to that public hearing to hear it. Majority of the people who spoke in favor of that project. So right now we're in the middle of that environmental impact study. It's expected that it could possibly conclude by this summer. Mm-hmm. And so what the legislation does is actually provide some nuisance protections for the industry, as well as a liability shield for the industry against space flight participants who are willing participants who sign a waiver and agree to the risk of going into orbit. That's what it does. But what this also does is indemnifies the companies against violating noise ordinances, is what I think I've heard. The initial bill did do that. It did provide those protections. We sort of model it off of existing nuisance and noise protections that are already in Georgia code based on hunting ranges and shooting ranges, hunting preserves that already have that kind of protection. So our initial language was modeled after that.
Okay. So, you've obviously really started studying up on this whole idea of spaceports. Private ventures into space are going to grow and grow, I assume.
Correct. And not only that, our satellite technology is getting smaller, therefore the rockets are getting smaller. So we're looking to shoot off mid-size rockets, not the very large rockets, but the mid-size rockets, because the payloads are getting smaller because the technology is advancing and getting smaller as well.
Do we have a sense of how many states out there are beginning to look at getting into this business?
Well, Georgia is one of the very few space states now trying to get into this race. Obviously, we have to compete with our neighbor in Florida, Texas, New Mexico, California, and Virginia. And also Alaska has a spaceport as well. So these are states that already have been in the business for a while. Georgia is looking to get into that business because the commercial industry is exploding. And so what we're finding is that the federal ranges or the federal spaceports are competing with federal launches and commercial launches. So these commercial companies want to be able to get a spaceport and use those assets to get their payloads up into space without having to compete with the federal government.
So for the people who are working with you on this, what's the vision for when this could actually happen for the state of Georgia?
If all goes well and the environmental impact study goes well and it concludes by this summer, it is very possible we could get the green light for our first launch, or for a license for our first launch.
When?
So this summer. That is possible that we could get the license.
But you got to build, but the facility has been.
Right.
So when do we, okay, so when is that first launch going to happen?
Well, after the first license is issued, infrastructure has to be put in at the site.
Sure.
Now, I will remind you that this is a site that tested the largest rocket engine in NASA's history back in the 1960s. So there is some existing infrastructure already there, and infrastructure is really concrete launch pads. There's not a lot to it. And so once we go through this process, I am told by industry experts that it's most likely in 2018 when we could possibly see the first launch.
So we did not put you two on the same show intentionally around this issue, but it is interesting as I'm listening to Jason Spencer, Representative Buckner, that you are sitting next to him because you are deeply committed and have been. I've known you since long before you were a legislator, and protecting the environment is something that's always been a very important part of who you are. So I'm assuming you're going to look very carefully at what the environmental impact is going to be on a place like Camden County, yes?
Well, I think those are all questions that have to always be asked with any kind of new industry that comes. So yes, environmental impact, and of course the noise ordinances have come up, and he's had to address that, and there are a lot of people that are concerned about that. But I'll have to confess, I did go to Florida to watch the last launch of the last shuttle, and it's an absolutely amazing thing to see and to imagine all the different things we have been able to learn with space.
So you have a soft spot in your environmental heart for shooting off rocket ships.
Well, I don't want to go too far. I don't want it to hurt anything, but knowing Jason, I don't think he wants it to hurt anything down there either.
That's right. That's right.
Hopefully they'll do due diligence to make sure that they take care of everything.
Okay.
And they won't give away the farm to entice them to come to the community like we do sometimes trying to get industry to
Yeah, down the road, do you envision, are there going to be tax breaks involved in attracting businesses?
Well, Georgia has an array of research and development tax incentives already on the book.
These would apply.
And this would most likely apply to the situation.
Okay, so we talked about your work in environmental issues. You are right now working to pass a bill that has to do with buffers along state waterways. We already have existing statutory law on this, but after a court decision this summer, you have to tweak that. Is that really what this is all? This is HB 966?
A lot of people say it's just we can't go through a session without a buffer bill because we have one every year. This is just to put, it's really a cleanup bill and put a definition in the law that the Supreme Court said we needed to put in there.
Okay, but let's go back. And for those of us who are not up to speed on the real technicalities of this, and talk about buffers on waterways and why they're important to all of us.
Okay. Well, the main reason we have buffers is in regard to soil erosion and sedimentation. When you are building something new, you want to be careful that you aren't so close to the water's edge that you're causing that dirt to run off into the streams and fill up ponds or lakes or streams. And so if you set it back, and there's a 25-foot buffer in most of Georgia along the streams, rivers, and lakes, then that gives you the comfort zone to keep from adding that extra silt or dirt into the pond or stream or whatever waterway.
All right, so we'll get to the refinement that you're making now in a moment, but I want to ask you a different question. Again, treat me like somebody who doesn't know anything about this, which I don't. What fills that buffer, that 25-foot buffer? What's there?
What can be there, it can be grass, it can be trees down to the water's edge.
Okay.
And you just, like if they're building a road, many times in the past before we had buffers, the dirt that was moved in the building of the road would just wash off in a rainstorm and it would get into that area where the trees and the
Right.
grass and whatever's growing, and then it would get into people's ponds and fill them up, or it would wash into people's yards and ruin their landscaping or fill up their yard with the dirt off of the road. And so it was decided years ago that this 25-foot buffer was needed. That's not changing. The only difference is that we are saying that we need the buffer to be in areas, and in the definition that was in the law that they were using at EPD said that there had to be this thing called rested vegetation, which nobody understood. Even the courts had some conversation about it. So it was decided by several of us that we would look at what other states used, and we're the only state that uses rested vegetation as its only determining factor of where you start the measurement for the buffer.
Okay, I'm not sure we even want to go deeper into the weeds, excuse the expression on that.
All we're trying to do is make sure that there is a clear line so that when people want to develop, they know where the buffer's going to be.
Makes sense. And this is legislation that's important to someone like you in your district, because you have all sorts of, there's all sorts of erosion and that can come downstream and really affect your constituents, right?
In the past, Debbie and I have worked on a lot of environmental issues that affect the coast. In particular, a bill last year that had to define the buffer zone for coastal marshlands, and we're taking, and I agree with her legislation, and we're taking that next step to protect these waters in the area, especially down where I live, where a lot of our economy and our livelihood and our quality of life depends on the health of our rivers and streams.
Is this controversial?
You wouldn't think so, but there is a bill that has been introduced in the Senate to deregulate erosion sedimentation.
Right, that's why I asked.
And with that piece of legislation, we will have to have this new buffer bill because we'll have to have it to protect our rivers.
I think you've got broad bipartisan support in the House
for the bill
on an issue like this, especially the rural areas of the state. Regardless of party lines, I think you're going to get bipartisan support.
But if I'm a developer, I am likely to look with some skepticism on anything that in any way hampers my ability to develop as I see fit on any piece of land that I have.
That is true, but they are used to developing and aware of the 25-foot buffer, so now there will be less confusion of where the measurement will start and end.
Fair enough. Let's do this. Let's take a break now. When we come back, there's a variety of subjects I'd love to talk to you both about. Among them, the fact yesterday, Jason Spencer, you mentioned to me before we came on the air, you were really interested in you were part of the breakfast yesterday that the Faith and Freedom Coalition hosted to talk about religious liberty measures that are under investigation at the House, are under debate. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk a little bit about the results of that New Hampshire primary. Each of you has a candidate in the fight as it comes towards Georgia, so we'll talk a bit about that too. So we will be back with more lawmakers in a minute. But first, how well do you think you know your lawmaker? Representative Valencia Stovall is a Democrat from Lake City, representing House District 74. She was sworn into the General Assembly in 2013, but she says she cut her political teeth as a child observing her father. He was Lovett Stovall, and he was an active participant in Georgia politics. He aided in the campaigns of Atlanta Mayors Maynard Jackson and Shirley Franklin, among many others. The Stovall political legacy continues. Lawmakers will be back in just a minute.
Tonight at 8, feel the love as we explore Georgia's most romantic places, just in time for Valentine's Day. Follow real couples as they visit some of the state's most unique vacation spots and learn how to truly get away from it all. Want to get in on the action? Visit gpb.org/romantic places during the broadcast for your chance to win a stay at one of 6 featured destinations, and join our live Twitter chat at MyGPB. It all starts tonight at 8, only on GPB.
Nathan Deal is only the 4th Georgia governor to officially identify himself as a member of the Republican Party. By contrast, there have been 38 Democratic governors, 15 who called themselves Democratic Republicans, and a dozen who were members of the Whig Party. Welcome back to Lawmakers. Here tonight with Representative Debbie Buckner and Representative Jason Spencer. You know, let's do something real quickly. You're a sponsor, one of the sponsors of a bill called the Right to Try bill. It really deals with an important issue that any number of legislatures around the country have also been dealing with. Explain what it is.
Well, the Right to Try bill is authored by Representative Mike Dudgeon out of Forsyth County, and what that bill does is essentially allow people to use experimental drugs that have already went through the phase 1 safety process of the FDA safety process. So it allows them to have access to that medication. It kind of waives the long process of what they call the compassionate use waiver that the FDA actually puts in. A lot of the times these waivers, they really get in the way for people's choices. And what this bill essentially does, it applies only to terminal patients. And this bill is a completely voluntary process. The insurance companies are not forced to pay. Doctors are indemnified. And it's a totally involuntary process, and informed consent is actually...
and you're a physician's assistant, so you see people in your daily work who could be beneficiaries of this kind of legislation.
Absolutely. I mean, when you have a terminal condition and your only option is an experimental drug, and you want to have the right to try that, I think you should. I don't think the government knows best policy should be what decides your decision. And the Ebola situation that happened a couple of years ago, where there was only one experimental drug out there, is a classic example. So it was the only thing on the market, and when people get a disease that's mortality rates almost 95%, they need an option, and I don't think government should get in the way of that decision.
You're on board with this legislation. You're not a sponsor, but you think it's a good bill.
I think so. I think we need to be very compassionate and allow as many opportunities as possible for people that have terminal illnesses. And we've got not a great success rate with a number of the cancers, for example, in Georgia. So hopefully there'll be some drugs that can help us find some cures and help these people. I hope it won't be an opportunity for people to... for insurance companies to decide not to pay for them when they go on the market, though. I want to make sure there's not a back door where they can...
Yeah, but this is a completely voluntary process.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've got, 8, 9, 10, 12, 20? I don't know how many religious liberty bills are floating around down under the Gold Dome.
Last I heard there were 4 or 6.
There's at least 4.
There's at least,
yeah.
I think there's more than that, but who's counting?
Yeah, obviously not me.
So yesterday, the Faith and Freedom Coalition had a breakfast, certainly rallying people around these bills. Jason Spencer was there. Most Democrats are a little concerned about virtually all of these bills, except the Pastor Protection Act, which the Speaker supported. How worried are you about bills that many Democrats, at least, think might lead to discrimination against gays and lesbians, whatever?
I do think that we have to be concerned about that. I've struggled with this bill because of the fact that I have not been able to tell what the bill does that the Constitution doesn't already guarantee.
You're now probably talking SB 120, Jason McCoon's bill.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, so much of what we have seen is covered by our Constitution, and so many of the lawsuits that have occurred have been upheld. The religious rights of the individuals that had a question have been upheld. So I'm not real sure that we need more legislation. I don't think that the Pastor Protection Act is necessarily required. Everything in it is pretty much covered.
Josh McCoon's bill, you're all for that. I mean, that's really kind of been the anchor bill behind this, and you support that legislation.
Absolutely. I do support the RFRA Act. I do support Representative Setzler's companion bill in the House. And essentially what it is, it's the language that was passed during the Clinton administration. It had bipartisan support. So it's just reaffirming that the state has to have a compelling interest to violate somebody's religious liberty. So that's all this does. There's nothing in that language that would be a cause for discrimination.
The problem is that the business community, among others, worries that there are things that allow for discrimination,
And I think when the amendment was offered up in the Judiciary Committee last year, when they were talking about Senator McCoon's bill and that was not allowed to be added onto the bill, that was an anti-discrimination amendment, it made everybody very nervous that there might be a hidden agenda. So if there's not one, then that needs to come out.
Well, and this is why I want to talk to you about the breakfast that you attended yesterday, the Faith and Freedom Coalition. Last year, the Senate passed SB 129, the McCoon bill, easily. In the long run, it went to a conference committee, but it was really the House leadership that held that bill back. Is it your sense that this year these religious freedom bills, Josh's bill among others, are a little bit being looked at a little more favorably? The people are being won over? Is the Faith and Freedom Coalition making some inroads along with other groups that are in favor of these bills?
I think what you're seeing is the base of the Republican Party, and this is a Republican-controlled legislature. They're speaking out on this issue. The churches have been asleep at the wheel for a long time. They're now seeing incidents where people are losing their businesses because they say they're discriminating against others. But I think what you're seeing...
Wait, they're losing business? You have to explain it.
There was a business in Oregon that got shut down because they decided not to bake a cake for a same-sex couple, and after that happened, they got essentially had to close down business. And so when
the government did not shut them down.
The market
shut them
and that's
down,
what
right?
The market did shut them down. However, there was a case in West Virginia where the Attorney General did actually try to impose government sanctions on a business owner there.
The problem with these bills is they're all going to end up in court, yes?
Yes.
I mean, every one of them is probably going to be challenged, and the state of Georgia will have to defend them in court. You don't deny that, do you, Representative?
I don't deny that, but I don't. You have 30 states in the country that have RFRAs, and there's not been one case upheld saying that the RFRA is the one that actually caused discrimination.
Okay, fair enough.
And
yeah, go ahead.
It's been really interesting because I have been receiving some emails from people who are pastors, and they are actually pastors within, saying that the Georgia Baptist Convention is not speaking for them, that they feel perfectly satisfied that if there were a reason that they didn't want to, for example, marry someone, that they could do that now with the Constitution.
So I would guess that if you went out to the faith community in Georgia, you will have people all over the map on this, because certainly there are a lot of preachers out there who have been very supportive of this. It's both ways, right?
I think it's both ways is the point.
Okay.
The faith community is waking up.
Okay, we got just a couple minutes, so let's do it real quickly. You're a Hillary Clinton supporter here in Georgia. She got walloped on Tuesday night in New Hampshire.
It was not pretty, but she's going to do extremely well in South Carolina.
And what happens here in Georgia? Is she going to be, does Bernie Sanders have any opportunity to beat her in Georgia?
Well, I think so. I mean, I think but I hope not. I think Bernie is a likable fella. He has been a great statesman. He has done a great deal in the area of raising awareness of issues, particularly against Wall Street and that kind of thing. But I think what Hillary brings is a great deal of experience.
Yeah.
She's got a lot of talent and a lot of good.
You like her portfolio?
I do.
All right, we got to do this very, very quickly. You're a Ted Cruz man.
That's right. I think his Southern strategy is going to make more people support him, and I think it erodes into Trump support. I don't think you see Rubio making any large progress here in Georgia. I think his third place finish, Ted Cruz's third place finish in New Hampshire, was better than expected.
All right.
I just want people to get out and vote.
Everybody, just vote, period. I couldn't agree more. Thank you both very much for being here tonight. Time went very quickly with both of you. That does it for us for day 20 of the legislative session. We're halfway through. There's 20 days remaining. The lawmakers are taking tomorrow and Monday off for the President's Day holiday, so we'll see you again next Tuesday, the 16th. Of course, you can always keep track of us on Facebook and Twitter at GPB News, and we have full episodes posted at gpb.org/lawmakers. And please don't forget, Political Rewind, our radio show, is on the air every Wednesday at 2, Fridays at 3 on GPB Radio around the state. I have so much fun hosting that show with our panel of insiders. I hope you'll join us and be part of that. Thanks again for joining us tonight. We'll see you again next time.